Quick disclosure to kick things off, EA provided me with a copy of the game. I won't be showing any major spoilers, I won't show the last mission, and I also won't show any character conversations in much depth, so you should be able to avoid pretty much all spoilers in this video. Anthem is a game that doesn't quite know what it wants to be. Its developer BioWare has exceedingly strong storytelling pedigree in the RPG genre, with series like Mass Effect and Dragon Age having earned the studio a healthy reputation over the years. The problem is, Anthem is not just another RPG at all. Instead, its combat, mission design, progression system, and endgame mark it clearly as a loot-em-up. If you've played Destiny, or The Division, or anything else in the genre really, you'll know that these sorts of games typically have throwaway stories that you don't often pay that much attention to, as your real focus is on that sweet, sweet loot. So the question is, has BioWare been successful in its attempt to infuse a meaningful and rich story into a game you're buying not for the campaign, but instead for what happens afterwards in the endgame looter-shooter grindfest? To answer that question, I've already sunk more than 80 hours into the game on PC, playing through the entire campaign twice, and spending plenty of time at endgame. Half of my time with Anthem was spent during early access, and the other half all came after the day one patch went live. So, unlike the more eager reviewers who posted their reviews before the game had even released on PS4, I feel like I have a slightly more comprehensive view of the game at launch. Recent further patches have also helped give an idea of how the game is likely to evolve during its live service, so I will cover that at the end of the video as well. Before we start, I do have one housekeeping note to mention. EA sent me a $15 Origin Access 1-month code to allow me to play Anthem during its early access week, so my soul naturally now belongs to them. Pitchforks are available to hire via the comments section down below. So, on to the review. Anthem takes place on an Earth-like planet created long ago by a mysterious race of gods known as Shapers. To craft the planet, the Shapers made use of a natural force called the Anthem of Creation. Many years later, your story begins. You play the role of a freelancer, a gun for hire whose job it is to protect your home known as Fort Tarsis, which acts as the game's hub world area. Freelancers don't get much respect in Fort Tarsis, but you need money, so you do the job anyway. The premise of the story is quite simple. A group of bad guys called the Dominion want to take control of the Anthem of Creation. You want to stop them, but unfortunately they have a powerful pyramid-headed psychic called the Monitor on their side. The only way you'll be able to defeat the Monitor is if you use the power of friendship to fight against the odds and save Fort Tarsis from the Dominion threat. Piece of cake. This pretty generic premise results in a pretty generic narrative unfolding over the 15 to 20 hour story. There's a twist midway through the game that happens in an attempt to up the stakes, but it ends up being extremely predictable, and the game then makes the really bizarre choice of hardly talking about that twist or its implications for a few hours of gameplay before half-heartedly going back on the decision just so the plot can move along. As the story trundles towards its apex and then concludes with its final boss fight, you're left with a strange feeling of emptiness. Throughout the whole game, you wait for things to get more tense and to feel your adrenaline building, but that tension never really comes. You also hope to learn more about the Monitor and his motives, because, I mean, he sounds like an interesting guy, but he only really has 3 meaningful scenes in the entire game, and none of them really tell you anything about him. As such, you never really care all that much about the things going on around you, and it honestly feels like the game doesn't really care what you're doing either. This disconnect is perfectly typified by Fort Tarsis itself. At the start of the game, you're supposed to believe that freelancers are practically shunned within the city walls because they failed a particularly difficult mission a few years ago. Random NPCs talk about how they wouldn't want to show their face either if they were a freelancer, and the atmosphere's generally just not supposed to be that friendly. This is presented in combination with the decline of the fort itself. Shops are closed, people aren't very happy, and there is little hope in the air.
I mean, I was born here. Fort Tarsis used to be great. It's kind of a crap heap now. Not sure why I keep coming back.
To be fair, you can't blame them for feeling this way because walking around the fort at a snail's pace, no less, is not a pleasant experience. An ear-splitting silence broken only by your own footsteps fills most of the space, NPCs stand around with their mouths moving but saying nothing, and the few characters that do talk shout the same 2 lines at you over and over again for the entire 20-hour story. And I'm not exaggerating here, just watch.
She seems like quite the character.
By the end of the game, all of that drudgery is supposed to have changed. People say that freelancers are finally respected again, and new shops are opening, the game's equivalent of people are coming to the castle, my liege.
With freelancers around, travel won't be so dangerous.
Right. Good things are happening, Jeannie. Life is good.
All the bustling? That's you. Decent food and weird stuff for sale again? Feels brighter, it doesn't smell. That's you.
The characters say that there is hope in the air, but then when you actually walk around the fort, you realize that it feels exactly the damn same. Sure, some subtle changes have taken place, but it's genuinely difficult to spot them because no matter what, the fort just feels unbearably dead. Now, none of that sounds fun at all, but the problems with the game's story are masked, and masked well, by some absolutely phenomenal performances. Right from the offset, you'll instantly find yourself liking Owen, Haluk, and Faye, the game's 3 main sidekick characters, and the rest of the supporting cast all does a great job too. This is in part due to some very inspired vocal performances, but I think the main victory is found in the game's motion capture and implementation. The cutscenes in this game simply blew me away. Not because of their graphical fidelity or flashy set pieces, but instead because I felt like I could actually see human emotions on the faces of the characters present in ways that are so rare in video games. It's something you notice as soon as the game begins, and the performances stay just as good right through to the end. For me, Faye was a standout character, but honestly, nearly every single character and cutscene in the game impressed me in some new way, thanks to the sheer attention to detail with which BioWare were able to bring the actors' performances to life within their world. It makes me eager to see more of these characters as soon as possible, giving me smirks behind the backs of other characters, or looks that convey 1,000 words without speaking at all. And that's all despite the fact that the overarching story wasn't that amazing. I still just want more. Now, you compare Anthem to other series starting titles in the genre, such as Destiny 1, for example, and the game does really well. Remember, this is our first foray into the world of Anthem. Even though everything is still new, everything is having to be introduced for the first time, I'm already curious about new aspects of the world of Anthem in ways that Destiny 1's launch could only have dreamed of, and the game's only just come out. As far as I'm concerned, that's a damn good start, and so despite its flaws, the story gets a double thumbs up from me. I am happy to admit that I'm a sucker for nice graphics in video games, and Anthem doesn't disappoint here in the slightest. The scenery around you, while often fairly samey looking, does look beautiful, and the environment artists have done a great job of making the world look interesting at whatever height you're viewing it from. In the middle of combat, the flames of explosions, crackle of lightning, and shards of scattering ice around you all look phenomenal and make for some great eye candy and screenshots. However, if you truly want to be humbled by the beauty of this game, you have to turn on HDR. Now, I'm lucky enough to own a PG27UQ monitor which Asus sent me last year, and it's meant that I've been able to play in 1440p on ultra settings with HDR on and still been above 60 FPS with no tearing, and oh man, HDR just takes this game from looking great already and turns it into an absolute spectacle. The sheer brightness of the effects on your screen, the depths of the shadows in the world, the whites in the flames, just I can't even begin to describe and put into words how good it looked. I'm sure to an extent it's the PG27UQ doing some of the work, but man oh man, I have to give the game credit here. It looks insanely nice when you max it out. Now, it's not all positive. One negative point is that the game only really has one biome. Sure, you can go underwater a little bit and stuff like that, but Everything for the most part has the same verdant but also rocky kind of look going for it. Now, while I personally don't care about this that much, I admit that it does make all the missions blend together a bit more than they otherwise might, and I'm definitely looking forward to hopefully seeing some new terrain being added in future DLC. They get away with it with the on-disc content. They manage to scrape through without the environment ever feeling like it's too much of the same thing for the whole experience, and I suppose the benefit to that is that their playbook is now completely open to do whatever the hell they want in the future. So, I've talked about what they tell in Anthem in the story, but now I want to talk about how they tell it. As often happens in video games, the gameplay of Anthem can be split into 3 main loops. You have a short loop constituting moment-to-moment gameplay, including using your abilities and firing your guns. This is a 30-second loop. You then have a medium loop dictating how each overall encounter works and how you travel between encounters within each mission. And then you've got a longer loop which keeps you moving mission to mission and sets the pace of the whole story. Anthem's short loop is undeniably fun, if a little confusing at times. No matter which of the 4 classes you play as, you'll approach each encounter with 2 guns of your choice, 3 abilities of your choice, and a class-defined ultimate attack. The guns in the game all look and feel pretty much identical until endgame, and while the gunplay doesn't necessarily feel bad, it definitely isn't as polished as competing games like Destiny 2's gunplay, for example. On the other hand, the abilities you unlock are very satisfying to use, and diverse enough that you can rotate through varying playstyles even early on in your character build. Abilities are also the gateway to combos, and even 80 hours into the game, I'm still really enjoying that little dink sound that plays every time I successfully land one on an enemy for some bonus damage. However, this is where the confusion I mentioned kicks in. Combos are a huge part of the game, requiring you to prime enemies with certain abilities and then detonate them with others. But despite their importance, Anthem doesn't mention them even in passing in the opening tutorial mission, and the only way you can find an explanation of the system is by hunting through the game's aggravatingly slow menus. It never points you in that direction, it never lets you know that that information is there, you just have to stumble on it. And for a feature that pivotal to basic combat in the game, it's unusual that players aren't told about it directly. Combat in Anthem also suffers quite heavily from feedback problems, especially as you begin to increase your difficulty setting. I'll be happily shooting away mid-fight, only to find that I'm suddenly at 1 HP, but I don't even really know why. All the enemy types in the game work in pretty easy to understand ways, and are very predictable in the way that they attack you, but I still find myself taking mystery damage a little bit too often for my liking. Thankfully, once you're used to the game's quirks, the combat is really fun like I said, it just works and it works well. The 4 available classes play significantly differently from one another, and so if you feel like you need to spice up your gameplay and give yourself a change of pace, you can absolutely do that without too much effort at all. You unlock each of the classes as you go through the campaign, and you can choose the order that you unlock them in, and so you really do get to rotate your playstyle nice and often. Once you eventually get to endgame, everything gets an added layer of complexity as well, which only serves to make the whole combat experience more enjoyable, but we'll talk about endgame later in the video. Sadly, Anthem's medium-length loop is the game's biggest flaw, by far I would say. The standard mission encounter design is horrendously repetitive, forcing you to complete the same 5 or so objectives over and over and over again throughout the story. The encounter types are as follows. 1. You pick up some things, and then you potentially also put those things back down again somewhere else. 2. You fly to some things, and then put them back down somewhere else. 3. You stand in a certain area until a timer completes. 4. You look at a puzzle object, so it might be a pattern on a wall for example, and then you match it up with some kind of device in front of you. 5. You shoot a thing, whether it's a bigger boss like a Titan or an Ursix, or a smaller wave of enemies like the Scar that pop up in literally every mission, until they're dead. And that's it. These happen in every mission, multiple times per mission, and the game attempts to make it more bearable by piping awful, cliched dialogue into your ear at every given opportunity to try and explain what's happening. To make matters worse, it's actually painful to listen to that dialogue, not only because it's so clumsy, but primarily because the characters sound like they're yelling at you in a Modern Warfare 2 pre-game lobby, with a horrible vocal filter that feels like it's actually cutting into your eardrums. Thankfully, the game does allow you to turn down voiceover volumes separate to the rest of the game audio, which helped remedy this problem for me, but still, why do they sound so bad, man? Now, I wouldn't mind the objective repetition nearly as much if there was some other unique objectives thrown in, but instead, it feels like you really do relive that same 5-minute task over and over again. To illustrate my point, I took the 5 categories I mentioned previously, and I tallied up how many times they happened to me in the story, counting all the main quest missions and the first 2 agent missions for both Bryn and Matthias. Anytime the game told me to go and collect 3 to 5 arbitrary objects, I'd add a tally to category 1. Moats went into category 2, green circle beacons went into category 3, all the sort of puzzly stuff, as long as it was the same style of puzzle and the same design, went into category 4, and then finally, like I said before, having to defeat the Dominion, or defeat the Scars, or kill the Ursix, or kill the Titan, essentially kill whatever is in the space around you, that stuff all went into category 5. Now there was a lot more basic enemy killing than I've actually bothered tallying here, but I wanted to focus on the encounters that felt like major objectives compared to very sort of small minor little moments. The results are as follows. The Anthem campaign contains 9 collect objectives, 4 moats objectives, 13 green circle beacons, 4 basic puzzles, and about 33 kill the enemies in this room objectives, of which about 5 of them are Ursix, 5 of them are Titans, and the rest are just killing a bunch of Scar. The only other task of note involved a unique locking mechanism puzzle, but sadly, beyond that, there really is nothing else to it. And don't get me wrong, you could absolutely argue that of course it repeats encounters, so does every game on the planet. But to make that argument is to miss the point that in Anthem, it's unbearably obvious that you're repeating yourself. Mastery of game and encounter design results in the player being tricked into doing the same thing over and over, but hardly realizing it's even happening. Instead, Anthem achieves the polar opposite. The game doesn't even try to hide the repetition either. In one mission, I fought a big bullet sponge Ursix, which took far too long, it was way too spongy, and then I fought 2 more, and then I fought another one that was even spongier. No interesting changes to gameplay, no cool boss mechanics to learn and exploit, no meaningful change to the environment or anything along those lines. No, I just sat and shot the same thing in the head 4 times in a row until the mission decided it had seen enough and it was going to let me leave. Now sadly, the final nail in the coffin is that the same objectives then appear again in the game's free play and stronghold modes, so you really do end up only ever doing 1 of 5 things at a given time. It's pretty rough. If the combat was any less fun, I might not have actually bothered making it all the way through the story, and sadly, I suspect some others will still quit before they do get to the finale. And it sucks because there are encounters that show a lot of promise. For example, the 3 strongholds in the game each have their own unique boss, with different attacks to learn to dodge, weak points to aim for, surrounding terrain to navigate, and strategies to find. These encounters are great, they're fun, they're unique, and sure, they aren't anywhere near as complex as those in a Destiny raid, for example, but they definitely have character and are indicative that BioWare are capable of designing cooler experiences than those that plagued the story. BioWare has also said since launch that the tech their game is built on means it will be easy for them to create new encounter designs and seamlessly thread them through the free-play world as soon as they're ready, but we'll talk about that a little bit later in the sort of future content section. So, while Anthem's short loop is a lot of fun, the medium loop leaves something to be desired for sure. Now let's talk about the longer loop, what happens as you sort of move mission to mission. Each time you finish a mission, you hit an endgame screen that shows you the XP you just gained and the loot you just earned. This screen feels completely pointless. It's a waste of time, exacerbated by the extra loading screens it makes you go through before you can get back to Fort Tarsis. It's only once you're back at the fort that you're able to change your character's abilities, weapons, or appearance, and if you compare this to other looter shooters, it absolutely sucks. In Destiny, when I pick up an an exotic piece of loot, the vast majority of the time, it decrypts right in front of me, and I can equip it right away during my mission. If I want to try a new gun, or test a few different pieces of armor, I can switch my arsenal up in seconds. Hell, I can even use an external website to drag items to and from my character's inventory without having to open the in-game menu if I want to. This makes Anthem look like cave art. If you want to change weapons in this game, you're going at best to have to quit your mission and wait about 3 minutes for load screens and to get back to the fort and then to load back in, etc. And at worst, you're going to lose your mission progress if you're on your own and you don't have a teammate to keep your spot. Maybe this is something that I'll come to appreciate in time. Maybe it'll make me feel like the decisions I'm making for my loadout have more gravitas, but surely if that was going to be the case, they could have simply done what Destiny sometimes does and prevented loadout changes in some missions but not in others. Right now, it just feels like a poor quality of life move from BioWare, and I really dislike it. So, once you get past the endgame screen and you finally make it back to the fort, you have two options. Option 1 is to head straight for your next objective marker, talk to a single NPC, and then start queuing up your next mission, which is what I did the first time I played through the story. When you're playing through with friends, you're chatting on Discord, and trying to get back into the action as fast as possible, this is the way you're going to want to play. Option 2 is to walk yourself over to all the NPCs that are waiting to talk to you throughout the fort, and work your way through each of their mini character arcs, which run alongside the game's story, which is exactly what I did on playthrough number 2. It turns out that those NPC conversations sometimes collectively end up taking more time than the mission you just returned from. There are a lot of people in Fort Tarsis. Now, unfortunately, some of the conversations really just don't go anywhere. Deviating from the BioWare games of old, the choices you make in those conversations rarely feel impactful, and some of the characters genuinely feel like they're trying their best to waste your time. There were some standout moments. Meralda's story, for example, is absolutely worth listening to, and I enjoyed the moral dilemma presented by Leighton the Spy and his wife, but I couldn't help but feel that no matter what decisions I made, even in those more morally challenging moments, the conversations would just end up going the same way regardless, and I wouldn't ever really shape the narrative. Whether that's going to be true in the long term or not, we just don't know right now. But certainly the feeling for the player is that no matter what happens, you can't really influence this world. With all of that said, there is a positive to come from all this, and that's that BioWare have succeeded in roping me in to care about quite a few more people than just the main cast of characters from the campaign. This obviously bodes well for future DLC and any expansions the fort itself might get. I've already got a lot of questions about how everything works in the world of Anthem, and at such an early stage of the game's life, I think this is a very positive start. Once you wrap up the critical path, the second life of Anthem begins, where the looter-shooter jumps out from the shadows and the narrative fades back into obscurity. There are still more people to chat to in Fort Tarsis, and you can replay the campaign on a second pilot if you wish, but your only true objective once you reach the endgame is to just start grinding for ever better loot. Most items in the game drop between common and epic rarities, and are nearly identical save for having higher base stat numbers. There are some bonus random stat rolls on the rarer loot, but they don't affect gameplay very significantly. Once you're leveled high enough though, you'll finally start getting masterwork and, if you're lucky, legendary drops, which are the same weapons but with much higher base stats, better random rolls, and they're infused with an extra static ability. This completely transforms the character building experience. What already felt pretty diverse between the different classes now feels even more so within the classes. You can work towards a storm build that goes for massive damage while hovering and also has a focus on fire attacks, for example, or a glass cannon interceptor which sacrifices your health for more powerful melee attacks. You have countless options, and this is where I see the future of Anthem. Less in the Destiny direction and more in that of The Division, where you're likely to spend a bit more time worrying about the difference between weapon damage and physical damage, or ensuring your gear puts you over a certain damage output threshold, rather than just making sure that you're at as high a light as possible. The game definitely lacks some features in this area right now. For example, there's no stat page in the game. A lot of the loot roll stats are nonsensical because they don't even apply to the gear that they're they're attached to, and the game also doesn't have an in-game glossary explaining what everything means, so you'll get a drop which has support luck on it and have no clue how that's going to affect your gameplay, but all of that is simply surrounding detail. The key point here, underneath the rubble, is that the endgame loot grind already has my attention, and it looks like it has the potential to develop in a very promising way over the coming months. Builds in Anthem are going to be crazy. They already are starting to be crazy. It's just down to BioWare now to lift the veil on exactly how crazy that's going to end up being. Currently, the best way to grind for all of that top tier gear is to complete activities on Grandmaster difficulties, which buff enemy health and damage, making them even more bullet spongy. You can farm from strongholds in free play, or from completing supplementary missions like legendary contracts, which are specific tasks handed out by the NPCs within Fort Tarsis. While I don't think this is enough content to keep people grinding the game for maybe more than a few weeks, it seems like the devs are committed to releasing new activities at a fairly quick cadence. As I mentioned earlier, BioWare recently noted that they should be able to add new encounters into free play without too much difficulty, and those will then populate the entire free play world, but also they'll become part of any legendary contracts that you might have otherwise been doing. So where a legendary contract currently might make you replay one of those 5 objectives I talked about earlier, instead you might wake up one day and find that you're suddenly playing a set of new objectives. These sorts of changes are fun to look forward to, and we'll talk more about the roadmap in a moment, but again, it's such early days, who knows if they're actually going to deliver on those promises. BioWare have committed to a live service for the game spanning multiple years, but due to legal restrictions, they're only actually able to provide a 90-day roadmap at any given time. The current one, admittedly, looks a little sparse for a launch window, but it does contain some notable additions, and it's also worth noting that this game does not have a season pass. The DLC will be free. One feature coming in a few weeks' time will allow you to replay the first few story missions in a kind of prestige mode, with much more hectic encounters due to higher enemy counts. Further missions will then be added as the year goes on. This sounds really damn cool. It's a way of recycling content, sure, but in a way that instantly makes me care about it. I want that challenge of going through again with everything maxed out to a nightmare difficulty. Another update coming in the next few weeks is going to add even more chests into the 3 strongholds, and they'll each have a pool of 100 cosmetic items for your character. You open the chests by completing daily activities, so you're incentivized to play the game every day and also to roll through those strongholds and end up getting that cool loot at the end. This, again, is something that I'm absolutely looking forward to coming out for the game. The details are obviously fairly light right now, but they sound like they're going in the right direction here. If we look a bit further into the future, Anthem will begin its first Cataclysm event in May. For many, this will make or break Anthem. With Destiny being notorious for its incredible raid designs, and the Division introducing 8-man raids this year to try and one-up its competition, Anthem's gonna have to work really hard to make the Cataclysm exciting and keep it standing out from the crowd. Again, there are very few details on what this is gonna entail just yet, so it's impossible to say if it will succeed or not, so for now, I'm just gonna have to keep my fingers crossed and hope for the best. Anthem has 2 in-game currencies. Regular gameplay earns you coin, and microtransactions can buy you shards. Both these currencies can be used to buy cosmetic items in the character customization shop, with the most expensive outfits costing about 61,000 coin, or $8.50-ish. Personally, I have no issues with the microtransaction prices in the game, especially as the upcoming stronghold chests will make it even easier to unlock character outfits. I will note that right now, there are just too few outfits in the game. It feels like the cosmetic system is extremely sparse, but with those chests on the horizon, I'm not too worried. What does worry me a little is the coin earning system. When I started the game, I felt like I was earning a lot of coin pretty quickly. However, the coin I was earning was coming from challenges in the game, which are only able to be completed once per account. So even if you start a second pilot on the same Origin account, you won't be able to do those challenges again. And so, when I did the campaign for a second time, I earned only 2,000 coin, even less than that in fact, in 20 hours of gameplay. Now, I should note that it is possible to earn coin from other activities. You're not only going to be doing those challenges, but I worry that as I run out of challenges, the earn rate may drop so low that I'm forced to either sit tight and wait for the Stronghold vanity chests, or resort to spending in-game money. And that's a situation that is sure to cause plenty of drama amongst the community online. These worries may end up being completely circumvented if BioWare acts swiftly enough to ensure that, for example, challenge rewards reset weekly or similar, but right now, it seems like the system does need a little work. Anthem's performance issues have been fiercely debated online since the pre-release demo. The main problems present in the game before the day one patch were massively long load screens and the loss of all game audio requiring an application restart. Because of these issues and because of some weird jankiness with the way cutscenes worked, reviewers were missing key story beats and generally having a bad time with the game. I mean, it wasn't just reviewers, it was everyone. These issues then fed into other problems that the game had. For example, during each mission, the tether system forcing you to stay near your team was absurdly short, and so if you had a long load time into a mission, your team might fly off, and so you'd load in and then have to go through another loading screen just to catch up with your team. That sounds a bit ridiculous, right? Well, the good news is that the day one patch has fixed the majority of problems people are experiencing, just as a day one patch should do. The game is absolutely not perfect still, and I'm not defending the glitches and bugs still present, but it doesn't take a genius to see the correlation between reviews posted before the day one patch arrived and negative review scores. Loading screens are absolutely bearable now, and while they do feel like they happen too frequently, and the tethering is still maybe a little harsh in certain circumstances, I'm used to it at this point, and I don't mind nearly as much as I did during early access. The audio bugs also stopped happening for me entirely, which is great. However, the day one patch did seem to negatively impact the game's smoothness. I now find that I can't play in windowed no border, I have to be in full screen, and even then, I find my game hitching uncomfortably, especially when playing strongholds and fighting bosses, as long as I'm not in solo. This is probably also as good a time as ever to point out that the game's menu system is complete and utter garbage. I'm sorry, I just had to say it. If I want to look at my current progress on a gun challenge, because there are gun challenges that you can do which unlock crafting blueprints, and I then want to equip that gun, I have to do the following. I have to be in Fort Tarsis, I have to press J to open my Cortex, then E to change tab, I have to click through to the challenge I care about, make a note of the gun name in my head, then hit escape, walk to the forge inside Fort Tarsis, wait for a loading screen, equip the gun in the gun menu, then exit the forge by waiting through another loading screen, and only then am I able to look back at my gun challenges or start a mission. It's just ridiculous how clumsy the menu is, and it moves so slowly as well. On top of that, many of the hotkeys feel counterintuitive, so if I'm in Fort Tarsis, I can press M to open my map, which is fine, but I can't then press M again to close the map. I have to hit escape instead, which means that I have to move my hand across the entire keyboard. Now, the map has a whole load of other problems with it. For example, if you're in a mission and you go down, you can't even see the damn map. The game doesn't let you. The game doesn't let you do anything, in fact. I mean, you sometimes can't even quit the dang activity without closing your application. And so, if your teammate goes AFK and is hiding behind a wall and there's no enemies killing them, you're just stuck, down, unable to spectate anything, you're just looking at your dead body on the floor. It's terrible. There's also no audio cue when your teammates go down in combat, and so, for all you know, your team might be more than happy to revive you, but they might not realize that you're even dead in the first place. There's also then no in-game text chat, so you can't communicate with them in any meaningful way anyway. If you're in a mission and you forget the name of the weapon that you're using, or the status effect that a certain piece of gear is giving you, which happens a lot because gear gives you buffs quite a lot of the time and it's hard to remember what they all mean, there's no way to check what that is without leaving the mission, going all the way through to the forge, and then loading back into the mission after you've checked your gear stats. It makes no sense that these problems are present in a game like Anthem, and it's completely counterproductive counterproductive to the game's flow. I'd say the majority of these issues all stem from the fact that they've decided to put the Forge in one place where you customize your character, and then certain menus in other places, and other menus in other places still. And you compare that to, again, something like Destiny. I hate to keep making the comparison, but Destiny does do a lot of stuff very well. In Destiny, all of those things that I've just mentioned are pretty easy for you to check at any given time with just a couple of presses of hotkeys on your keyboard. It's just painful to do in Anthem, and it really interrupts the gameplay experience. Okay. Now for the outlook. I'm going off script here. This is just going to be my closing thoughts on the game. I really like Anthem. I mean, you can kind of tell by the fact that I've sunk as many hours as I have into the game already, and I intend to keep doing that as the weeks go on. But I do feel like there are several fundamental issues with this game that are going to take some time to fix, and they're not going to be fixed overnight. Now, one of the things that I'm planning to allude to in my video title is that I think a lot of reviewers have given this game an unfair rap. I think that it's absolutely got a lot of problems, but a lot of the issues come from the marketing and the way that things have been conveyed to the audience, and it doesn't help that it was published by EA. I mean, EA are already demonized throughout the industry by gamers online. The game, once it has its day one patch, is much more playable than it was previously. The story is not as bad as some people have been making out. It is passable. It is better than Destiny or The Division or anything like that. And the endgame loot, when you actually get there after a couple of dry spells, is something that appears to have a fair amount of appeal. And it's got problems, but these games always launch with these issues. Think back to Destiny 1. It was a mess on launch. Think back to Destiny 2. It was a mess on launch. And that was with years of experience in Bungie's back pocket making this style of game. It's true that there is a lot that needs fixing, and it's absolutely going to take a while for those things to be fixed in this game. But I see promise here. The speed with which the game has received patches already in the last couple of days, and also the responses of the developers themselves on Twitter, eagerly trying to help people out when they have problems and answer questions when they pop up, is really good to see, and it sets the stage for a potential future community surrounding Anthem that will move past the negative kind of bubble that I feel the game is currently trapped in, and will hopefully mean that all of the people that right now are really trashing the game can come around to it in 6 months or a year and realize that maybe there is actually something pretty fun here. I'm absolutely not saying that if you dislike the game right now, your opinion is invalid, or if you're a reviewer and you reviewed the game poorly. I don't think that you're categorically the devil for saying those things by any means. All I'm saying is that I do think there is another side to the coin here, and while about 70% of this review has been me talking about the negative things that I've experienced, I also think that pretty much all of it is fixable given enough time and love from the devs. I don't think that there's anything so deep and buried within the fundamentals of this game's design that's going to mean that it's doomed from the very beginning. I just don't think that that's the case. And so, as I said, 70% of this review might be fairly negative, but I wouldn't be opposed to giving this game a 7 out of 10. I just wouldn't be. It's got a lot wrong with it, but it does a lot of stuff that I really like as well. And so an optimistic 7 doesn't sound so bad from me. I want to thank you for watching all the way through this video. I've spent a huge amount of time on it. Seriously, it's taken me so damn long to make this. So any support on the video would be really appreciated, and if you could share it around, that would be amazing. Let's generate some discussion in the comments and let's talk. Do you like Anthem? Do you agree with what I've said here? Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll hopefully see you on my channel for some more Anthem videos at some point in the future. Thanks guys, I've been MrRoflWaffles. This has been my official Anthem review. Bye for now.